Hi, everyone. This video is a little riff, some advice for future priests, pastors, ministers, anyone in a service-related field. And in fact, this is not just for future priests, but for present priests. And the question revolves around maximizing one's preparation and study, basically preparing for priesthood. But really, it's more than that. It's preparation for ministry and the life of ministry and what it means to study or to consider the academic side of preparation. One thing that happens is students find themselves getting stretched very thin across many different subjects that are really, when you're at the seminary level, they're introductory. So, in other words, the things you touch on in seminary are the beginning of a conversation. They're not necessarily the end of that conversation. So you don't need to be bogged down with all the minutia because this material can last you the rest of your life. And honestly, it should. Now, one of the topics that takes a lot of controversy, I suppose, these days is the study of languages as they relate to primary source documents. Usually that means scripture, so Greek and Hebrew, Aramaic as well. But it's not just scripture. It could be patristic material, it could be liturgics, any of these fields that has a long history that goes back to the distant past. And in fact, when I say distant past, I mean, we can even study the pre-Christian material. And so you can include things like Akkadian in that conversation or Ugaritic, as some places will teach. Now, that being the case, you also find seminaries these days actually eliminating language programs because they get a lot of pushback from students about how long it takes to study those languages. And so you even have some places doing a language tools workshop where people can use software that didn't exist in the olden days, 20 years ago, in the olden days. And so now they have software, and how do we use software and how do we understand grammar to, appropriately speak about language? Some seminaries are doing this. I completely disagree with that approach. I think it behooves someone in a leadership position to be trained as best as possible. And what that means is, both for general studies and for languages, it means maximalizing your effort. And some people are probably going to be critical of that move. In fact, it happens often. But the thing that you're doing is something that is inherently service oriented. It's going to be a maximum commitment for you. That's what the servant does. The servant commits in a maximal capacity. So the priest gives his life over to the congregation. And it doesn't mean that, your time has to be used frivolously or that it will be in the future, although that's the case with a lot of priests. They lose a lot of time away from their own families. Keep in mind, in Orthodox Christianity, priests are married, and so they have families usually. So it's not just that time is going to be taken away from your families, but it's also going to be utilized in a number of ways that maybe aren't as productive as possible. That said, what happens to you at the seminary level when you're training, when you're studying, when you're preparing, you're getting a taste of what commitment and overcommitment is going to look like. And what that means is, at this point, you need to become hyper aware of time management, where to best utilize your time. And some people may not always agree with the things you're doing, or let's say studying, take it, in terms of your studies. Maybe some classes will be excessively hard, others will be easy, and some folks may think they would be a waste of time for you to continue studying a certain topic that maybe, why are you paying for that class? It's too easy, right? All that to say, how to craft yourself. And there are certain things that, and maybe you don't know how to craft yourself, I don't know. But you better than I do, right? And so there are certain fields that are absolutely necessary. And then there are other fields that are necessary for enhancement. They're beneficial. So take liturgical studies. Liturgics, dogmatic theology, right? Scripture, those are necessary courses. Language classes are important, but I don't know to what degree they're necessary. I think that they are important in the sense that they are going to make you better. And in the end, we may end up saying, well, you know what, because I want to be better, I want to be the best servant I can be, because of that, now all of these other classes that are important, like languages, are necessary, right? So maybe a second level necessary field. What does that mean? It means different courses in languages need to be taken very seriously, and you need to be able to construct a basic framework for future learning and reference. You don't have to be perfect in Greek or Hebrew or Aramaic, Syriac, Coptic, Armenian, Slavonic, any of those. You don't need to be perfect in that by the time you leave your initial training, but you need the tools to continually engage and improve. Now, I had one student who didn't want to study two languages at once because he knew how studying one language was for him and didn't want to confuse himself. And I think that that is not always possible when the languages are radically different. Take, let's say, Aramaic or Hebrew and Greek. Those languages are very different. You mix in something like Spanish, an Indo-European language, German, Russian, whatever, and then you pair that with a Hebrew or a Greek. They're different enough that you're not going to start confusing things. Really, then it's a question of time management because you'll be doing similar tasks. Language learning is very similar across languages, but some languages, based on things like, how they're structured grammatically and how maybe we're able to, engage with modern speakers, those may change the ways in which we utilize the tools for language learning. All that to say, when you study any of these fields, languages especially, you need to carve out a time to execute that study properly. And some people may, see you dancing alone. They may see you doing something that they can't relate to. But know that whatever you're doing in your studies is building and shaping you into someone that you're going to be the rest of your life. And so this is not just for seminarians, but it's for people who want to continue studying afterwards. And if you don't want to continue studying and you're in the service field, you should, take a look in the mirror because continuing education is vital to our betterment. I mean, I still, I've got a doctoral degree and I'm constantly taking coursework. Okay. A lot of it's pedagogical related coursework. Some of it's administrative coursework. I'm still doing language coursework. I'm doing courses in other fields. And it's not as though I have a full-time study track, but I chip away through life, right? And the rest of my life, I plan on doing this. I'm going to be doing it and shaping myself until the end, God willing. And so this is the advice for people who are already in ministry. Continue your studies. If you haven't done languages in 10, 20 years, 30 years, whatever, brush off the books and get back into it. You don't have to be perfect. I think one thing that is a hang-up for a lot of people these days is they want to feel as though they're perfect in whatever they've studied. And some topics you can master because maybe, it's history, right? And you're concerned with dates, events, people, and maybe how they interface with everything else you're doing. That might be a little bit more manageable to lock down, at least at a cursory level. And so people feel more enabled when they have, accomplished, a basic foundational knowledge of something like that. When it comes to language, if you're not using it and engaging in it, it ebbs and flows, right? It swells, and then it diminishes. Here I go. I'm going to do a litany of these. But you have to use language in order for it to be strong. And so I think that's one reason why some people shy away from language studies or they get frustrated with it, or people don't understand the time commitment it takes. Now, in the beginning, it's always going to take a little bit more time than later on because you're building a foundation in the beginning. And if you're busy, just keep in mind, by the time that you become a priest, you're going to be busy. Maybe it's not the same way. Hopefully you're still studying, you're chipping away at things, but in your ministry, you're going to be busy with one thing or another for the rest of your life. So let this time be sort of a first run experience of what it's like to be incredibly busy. So for those of you students who this relates to, and, I'm definitely linking all of you, to this talk, consider it, consider, the time commitment you have to put out, but let yourself not be discouraged. You're not alone. And even if you feel like you're dancing alone, so to speak, you're not. These things are hard, but really excel and push yourself as far as you can go while managing the quality of your time as best as possible. It means you know, don't cut areas that are vital, like family, right? Wife and kids, maybe you're working full time, right? You have to know how to prioritize, but at the same time, maximize. So, questions or comments, I'd love to hear from you. If you're not one of my students, but you've gone through a similar experience, and maybe it's not even in ministry, but in, prepping for a different field, please go ahead and leave a comment below. We'd all learn from one another, and I look forward to hearing from all of you.